Anxiety and depression can make the world seem very black and white, and it kind of leads to this very black and white thinking in those moments. I know that when I'm feeling particularly anxious, I often feel like I'm being bombarded by potentially conflicting information telling me whether I'm safe or not. So, just to understand the kind of physiology of this, imagine, you're an animal in the wild and you are feeling threatened by a potential predator. An animal will be on kind of high alert and take in every single change in the environment, sound, smell, sight, to sort of learn if the threat is increasing or not, and what they should maybe do. As a person, of course, the threats that we do face are much more nuanced and complex. Everyone experiences anxiety and a heightened sense of discomfort. But when you have an anxiety disorder, you really feel like you're in that kind of primal state, even when the threats that you are facing are much more subtle and nuanced. So I actually think that scrolling social media and scrolling the news is kind of a perfect metaphor for how I experience anxiety, and one of the reasons why I think it's very harmful if you struggle with any kind of mental health issue to be scrolling. The way scrolling mirrors my anxiety is basically just a very quick succession of conflicting and highly volatile, potentially, information. So whether it's a headline that's sensational, or someone just pouring their heart out about how miserable they are, or how scared they are, or this sense that the apocalypse is coming. I mean, kind of the pitfall that social media can really be, or just scrolling the news and how really distressing it can be. That is what it feels like to me when I'm in an anxious state. So I have to be very careful, especially, now leading up to the election, and just in 2020 in general, just being very careful about how much news and social media I consume. The fact that what you read on social media and the news is constantly changing and it's in these small little headlines, is actually part of what makes it so toxic to me, because it's this bombardment of new information without any sort of real context. So one of the things that my partner Zach and I kind of decided very early in the pandemic is that he would be the source of news for me. He can scroll and he can be looking and reading, and he can maintain a level of detachment. So, looking at a headline and saying, well, is this a real reflection of what's going on? What's sort of the backstory? Is it more complicated than this? Is this person who's saying that we're heading for the apocalypse, are they having a really bad day? And what threats are real and what is sort of, allowing yourself to fall into someone else's emotional experience? He can have that kind of separation, whereas I can't. It's very hard for me to have that kind of emotional boundary. When the pandemic first started, I really thought about increasing my medication, and I mentioned this to my therapist, and she said, why don't you stop reading the news for a week and let's see how you feel. And it absolutely worked. It was just kind of astounding to me how much reading the news and being on social media was increasing my anxiety, to the point that I felt that I needed to increase my medication dosage. I think one of the hardest things is feeling that you can't control whether you're safe or not. You can't control your sense of safety. And a lot of the messages that we are getting today is that we are not safe and that the future is not safe. I don't want to diminish the threats that we are facing as a country, as a people. But this is just to remember that the truth is more complicated. It's gray, it's complex, it's nuanced, it's multi-layered, and that's not something that can be easily communicated in what's supposed to be a bite-sized snapshot or a single sensational headline. I had to come to terms with the fact that I am just a very, very sensitive person. And in my life, people have used the word sensitive as a criticism. You're so sensitive. Why can't you handle this? But I am learning to embrace the fact that my sensitivity is a strength. So yes, I cannot watch horror films, and even cartoons sometimes make me very uncomfortable. The way certain things move gets me just physically uncomfortable. So this is just a part of who I am. I used to kind of be down on myself for not being able to toughen up, and if people are actually experiencing this suffering, the least I can do is read about it and bear witness to it. I used to sort of really bully myself with those thoughts. But I've come to accept that that's not something that is very healthy for me. I know that my sensitivity to sound and light and color plays into my musical work. So I try to just, embrace the good side of it and forgive myself for not being able to read the news every day. Lastly, I would say if you are a very sensitive person and you are trying to be creative, exposing yourself to the reality of the news or sort of allowing yourself to go down the rabbit hole of social media, it will damage your ability to be creative. I think a lot of people are experiencing that. So I would just encourage everyone to protect themselves and to protect your mental health and your creative space during this time, especially as we head towards the election. All right, thanks for listening.